This week on LCARA Ham Radio, we're going to talk about tree frogs. No, we're not talking about tree frogs at all. We are going to install a cable pass-through panel on the outside of the MCOM trailer. We have actually points of entry for cabling for antennas in the two of the corners of the trailer, front and back, but we thought let's build a pass-through in the middle. And we talk about straightening up and how it makes you feel when you've been bent over for too long. That's what's coming up this week on LCARA Ham Radio.
So anyway, when it goes there, which one is the long ones?
This is a long one.
Out of the way. We know it'll fit. This way, like this.
There it is.
See, when that's in there like that, see, that'll be there.
And we begin the installation. Now, Don had cut those 1x1 pieces as backing for the panel. There's a gap between the wood that you see here, the wood that creates the wall of the trailer, to the metal skin of the trailer. About a 1-inch gap, maybe a little bit more. And so that is basically just dead space. And what we need is something for the pass-through panel to drill into, to fasten to. So Don had cut these, and these were in a previous video, just some of the various activities we were up to in a previous work day.
That all in place, then the framework will be held. Then we'll screw from the other side with our screws coming through here, see?
We have Don's explanation, and so he gets out his oscillating saw here and begins to cut out another portion of the wall, the wooden part of the wall of the trailer. And I'm not going to bore you with all of this sawing. We're going to speed it up in places as well, just so that we can get through this video a little bit quicker. But you can see he's taking his time, making sure that it's lining up with how those wooden backing pieces that he's sawn will fit behind this wooden wall section of the trailer. Again, Don is pretty, measure 3 or 4 times and then cut once kind of guys, and that's always the philosophy you want. Unless you're me, you have a tendency to get too much in a hurry. But you can see he's doing a little mock-up here of how the wood is going to be positioned behind the wooden part of the wall, but between the metal skin and this the wooden wall piece. And that's ultimately what the panel is going to fasten to there, just above his head on top of the desk.
That line straight across there, don't look straight there.
Well, it's fairly straight.
So he gets back to work with his trusty oscillating saw, and you can see he's got multiple cuts he's going to make. So let's speed this up a little bit and get you to where we're actually doing some fitment. So now we should be able to just remove that section of wood, and sure enough, it pops right out. So that's roughly the size that we're going to need for the backside of this cable pass-through panel. Now, this panel is the same kind of panel you could get at your RV shop. If you were building your own MCOM trailer and you wanted to create a place, let's say in the middle side of your trailer for cable pass-through, for power pass-through, like 12-volt, that sort of thing, you can get this panel, this very same panel there just above his head, at your local RV parts store, or probably online for that matter. So you can see Don is explaining how the wooden piece is going to go behind the wood of the wall, but between the metal skin of the trailer. And this is going to give the panel the ability to screw into something when we attach the panel from the outside. Now you can see we still have the metal skin, so we still have to remove that, and that'll be coming up a little bit later here in the video.
They've got that plywood 1/8 of an inch further in. It's not fitting. Oh. Idiot.
It's at this point we're going to breeze for brief intermission, Don bumped his head multiple times. I would encourage you down in the comments, guess how many times Don bumped his head in the building of this video. So we're basically cleaning up some of the edges and removing a little bit more material on the wooden side of where the pass-through is going to come through. But we need an extra tool here, so KY4CKP is going to go into our trusty tool chest and get a
You
screwdriver.
want to go in this way, the grain's this way, so when we put a screw in there, it'll go across grain and not with the grain, which could split it apart.
Okay.
And that's just one of those little things that his years of experience of just working with things, he's aware of the best way to handle that small piece of wood. Somebody new like me probably wouldn't have given it a second thought. But you can see how he's placing that behind the wall panel there, the piece of wood that represents the wall, but between the metal skin. And we'll do that with all 4 pieces. Now, originally we wanted the longer pieces. The 4 pieces that we're going to install are not the same length. There's 2 long pieces and 2 short pieces. And the vertical should have been the long pieces, and he accidentally had the small piece in his hand. And it's easy to do. You've got 4 pieces and you're thinking about other things. So we'll get all 4 of these pieces in, but a little bit later in the video you'll see that the screws and where they're positioned changes at the very end of the video, because we actually removed the 4 pieces of wood and put them back, or put them in their proper orientation. This is technically a small piece, or a small length, or a shorter length of wood. So he's drilled that piece, he's gone through the wall, now he's drilling into the piece of wood, and this will allow us to affix this piece of wood to the wall. And from the other side, we'll be able to fasten the panel that you see there on the desk next to the tub of screws from the back side into that same piece of wood. So we're switching out the drill bit with a Phillips attachment, and that will allow Don to screw in our first screw into that wood backing. Now he's just getting it in position, and then he'll move the piece of wood just in between that empty space. Small piece going in accidentally, but again, we'll fix this in the very end of the video. If you're wondering who's holding the light for this, that's me holding a camera and the light. So at times, you'll see it wiggle a little bit. In such close quarters, it can be a little bit daunting to try to get the footage that you want.
I have a nod head.
Yeah. He's gonna get tired of doing that.
You can see he's also trying to hold the piece of wood as best he can so that it doesn't move while he drills it. And then a second screw is going to go in to essentially affix it. Those of you that are eagle-eyed will notice that a portion of that wood that he's placed in there is visible, that we don't have the board, the wall board, extending all the way down. We're going to fix that a little bit later as well. He's going to cut a piece, little elbow or 90 degrees, so that we have something to attach to this wood backer. And now the cameraman is finally caught up with the idea of why not zoom in. So now Don is doing the fitment for the lower piece. Now this happens to be a long piece, and it should have been the short piece. The short pieces would be on the bottom, the long pieces on the side. And this actually threw off his measurements, and we didn't catch it until the very end. But thankfully, the wall panel itself is got a we'll call it a fairly wide bezel that covers up the gaps. Plus, we'll be putting in some weather stripping and whatnot. But we did finally get the pieces of wood where they should be. So again, screwing a pilot hole for the screw. Something that I learned to do just being with Don. I probably had seen the technique before, but never really learned the technique until I started working with Don. For some of you, you know what Don knows, and that is always do your pilot hole. And that way you get the screw goes in easier, but it also doesn't split your wood. And he's also screwing it into the wood against the grain and not with the grain. So now he's trying to figure out why his piece of wood has moved on him, and that's because we used a long piece on the bottom, but it just he hadn't quite seen the issue at this point. So we're going to make an adjustment. Apologies about the noise. I will speed that up, especially when we cut the skin of the trailer on the outside. Now he's going to put 2 screws into this vertical piece. Now this will be the second vertical piece, but he doesn't want to lose it if it were to fall between the wood and the metal skin. So these screws are so that he can hold on to it and position it while he's creating his holes for the actual screws that will hold it to the wallboard. That's a really handy technique. When he was putting those screws in, I had no idea what he's going to use them for, but he explain that a little bit later here. So another pilot hole drilled, and we move to the Phillips attachment, bit head if you will, and another screw goes in. So you can see this will be the 5th screw going in for this wood backer for the panel. Now these kinds of projects, this is just, something that Don has been thinking about for several months. When you have an emergency communications trailer, you have a tendency to put a lot of time and effort into it to get it up and running. But there's always other things, additional things you'd like to do, or upgrades that you would like to do. And this is essentially an upgrade. Like I said, we already have entry and exit points in the front and back of the trailer. But this will be in the mid part of the trailer when we're doing demonstrations and so forth, and have a tent out front.
I'd have trouble getting it out. Okay. With screws like that, I can hold it where it's got to be.
I had no clue. I had no clue.
Had no clue.
I didn't think you had anything behind the board, and I thought, I don't understand why the screws are going in.
Hollow wall there. If that thing was to fall down over behind there, then you'd
never have gotten it.
Well, we got it out, but it would have took a little fuss or whatever to get it out there.
Now that the screws have basically done their purpose, or we have used them for their purpose of keeping that wood where it needs to be while Don was doing the pilot holes and putting the screws in, you can see we've got 2 on the left, 2 on the right, 2 down at the bottom, and then we'll need to install the upper wooden backing. Now it's at this point we've got the wooden backers in. You can see the screws around the wooden entry there, the square entry. What Don is doing now is he's drilling 4 holes through the skin of the trailer at each corner that he's created with his wooden backers. These holes represent the inside square, if you will, that we'll need to cut on the outside of the trailer so that we can install the panel. 4 holes. We'll take something that offers us a straight edge. We'll create some lines, as we'll see in the next couple segments, and then cut the metal. So here's the outside of the trailer. When we first started talking about putting this panel in, I was worried that it might actually impinge on the lettering that we have just right above it, which is part of our calling card, if you will. When we take the trailer out, we get nice publicity and marketing from this trailer. And so you can see he's drilled those 4 corner holes. This is going to give him the line that he needs to draw, and he's just taking his clipboard here to create a straight edge to create the horizontal lines, and he'll do the same for the vertical. And here we're finishing up the vertical line, and then we're going to take our oscillating saw and we're going to cut out this piece of metal. Which is very high pitched. So we're just going to show just a little bit of this but I've got the volume turned way down here, but you can see how loud that is. So we'll cut away from this, speed it up, and finish this off. Thank goodness. A little bit quieter. This is a great way to see how this is being done anyway. A little bit of finagling, but Don found his corners and was able to basically cut that exactly the way he wanted to.
Well, how about that?
Hey, you got a hole in the side of your trailer.
You didn't want it there.
I don't know, Don. I think now that that hole's so big, we're going to have to get a new trailer.
I know, got to get a new trailer. The hole's too big.
Got to move it 2 inches to the left.
This is basically at this point, we now have our hole. But as we will soon find out, we didn't have the pieces of wood in the right orientation. We actually wanted the longer pieces vertical and the shorter pieces horizontal. You can see we're putting the plate up here. If we turned it 90 degrees, it would have fit. But we don't want it to be oriented that way. And so we think our hole's too small, and I'm sure Don was trying to figure out, well, how can that be? Because I cut these pieces of wood to be perfect for the edge of the panel that actually is inserted.
Yeah. See, it'll go in there now.
But you can see it's a little wide,
It's plenty wide.
and that's because we used the long pieces on the top and bottom. Anyway, we ended up making the hole a little bigger than we needed. But again, because this panel has a pretty wide bezel, it covers all this up. And we are going to install the panel at the very end and as just a mock-up, but we still have to put some weather stripping behind it and so forth. So a little more cutting. Let's speed this part up. Alrighty, so the oscillating saw goes to work. At this point, Don's gotten better at kind of getting it in the sweet spot.
Let's see what we can do.
Pull to Brian.
Now this is where Don finally said, you know what?
Certainly did not.
The reason it's not fitting the way we were doing was we didn't have the wooden pieces oriented correctly. We've got 2 longer pieces and 2 shorter pieces. Plus, we need to cut out a little bit more of that wall backing for the 4 pieces of wood. So you can see he's already got the pieces of wood back in their proper orientation, and he's created this little elbow or L to be installed so that we can get the bottom right corners of the 2 backing pieces of wood. So it's just a matter of screwing a couple more holes on both pieces of wood, or at least one hole, and then putting in some additional screws.
We never found no cursing or bad language.
You can also see the holes on that top piece. You can see we've put that backer up a little bit, and you can see the old holes, kind of just the gray holes there instead of the darker black. And we're getting to where we're almost finished. We're just doing some final fitment to make sure that it will fit in that spot. And Chris is on the other side, and sure enough, it fit pretty well. So we're pretty happy. Of course, you can see that L piece is missing, but we'll get that put back in. Now Don's going to drill from the outside. So eventually, the whole point of having those wood backers in the wall was so that when we drill from this side, there's some meat back there that we can drill into, because otherwise it would just be air in the skin of the trailer, and that wouldn't be good enough for the long-term ability for this panel to stay on the side of the trailer. So we basically put, I believe, 4 screws in. This is the last one, drilling the pilot hole first and then putting the screw in. But that is, we're just mocking it up so we can see it there. And you can see it does not and at all cover up the lettering that we have on the outside of the trailer. So a project that took about 2 hours, but in a video we can knock it down to about 20 minutes. And it's additional types of these, I guess you would call them ancillary projects on a major piece of, or a major asset like the MCOM trailer. We still need to put up cameras on this trailer. We have cameras. We haven't installed those, but we've been waiting for this pass-through panel to be installed so that the cabling for the cameras can come in from the outside, as well as 12-volt power so that we can run radios beneath the tent that we set up, usually on the side of the trailer when we're out in the public. We're out in the public sphere fairly often with this trailer, and we would like to do demonstrations on the outside when weather and so forth permits. And this will give us that ability to pass through cabling for antennas, pass through cabling for 12-volt power. I think we're going to do 110 from here as well, so we can actually have some AC power if we need it. And we're also going to be utilizing this pass-through for other things. So it's going to be very useful. Small project, but a big impact on the trailer itself. We hope you like this video. Hit subscribe and like the video. Let us know down in the comments how many times you think Don bumped his head. We're interested in that. And we hope you enjoyed the video. We'll see you down the road. And we want to wish you 73.